Hey Internet, this is Gunter with MiniMishaps Games, and today we are looking back at our 30 minis from January. So, it's actually like 34 minis and a couple of pieces of terrain, but we're exceeding the 30 minis pretty consistently, and if it bumps up, then we'll eventually just be doing 40 minis in 30 days, or whatever the number gets to. So this is 30 plus minis, and it's gonna be a month of obvious growth, because the first mini in our lineup is probably the one that I have had the most things go awry that I didn't want to. So this is SpongeBob, and this was going to be in a set of minis. I did a dragon for my dad for Christmas. I did the 3 wise men for my mom, and I was going to give my 4-year-old a SpongeBob, and this was the first attempt. It's terrifying. I don't know if we'll even be able to use it in D&D, but it's also the first time I've ever redone a project. Normally I'm allowing my projects to stay scary and amateurish because it's meant to be a log, it's meant to be a progress, and it's meant to show you guys that it's okay to make things that are really scary looking. But I did remake this one, and here's the second SpongeBob, obviously much less terrifying, and this one I did actually glue the face on. So it's sort of a combination of made the clay parts and glued them together, and then put the face on separate. So probably cheating, but he liked it a lot more than the Nightmare Fuel first try. So next up, we have got our Scorpion as Scorpion, meaning this is the Scorpion from Spider-Man miniature. And the Subversion of Expectation challenge meant that we gave him a paint job like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. So kind of a fun subversion of expectation. You're expecting one and getting the other. Next up, we have got, this was my first attempt at doing highlighting in the green and light green and teal and white. And it's at the time, I definitely really liked how it turned out. I apparently in 30 days have become more critical with my own art. Some of these pictures I realized I didn't necessarily go back and color the base, or I left a lot of them with some work to still be done. But this was a little 90s toy, and the first attempt for highlighting it went pretty good. Next up, for the Subversion of Expectation Patreon piece, we basically painted this halfling to look like he was petrified, and the creature is actually the cloud coming out instead of it being like a ninja bomb or a spell effect. The clouds actually on the other side have like a face, so it's almost like it's coming out of the ankle or something of this petrified halfling. So yeah, and again, I didn't clean up the base, and the shoes and connection points are kind of sloppy. But again, that's going to progress as the months go by, and everyone is better than the one before. So next up, we had our Kit Bash challenge, and this is a version of the Magineticist, and so he's got a couple of cut-up shell beads for body parts, and the mermaid tail. He's got a lot of like little plastic pins or porcupine spikes, and the little metallic owl is sort of the crown piece. It's got little fake jewel diamond eyes. So that was, this one eventually later did get a coat of sea green over the white plastic, but this was the stage it was in at the end of the project. For our minis from scratch, we did origami, scorpion, and then painted him, and as well as the flower that we made. So, you know, the paint kind of bled in the paper that I was using, and so didn't really come out with like the miniature in plastic wood for detail, but I still like the way it turned out. The black and yellow was a nod to the other scorpion that we did. Okay, so this penguin robot, the miniature was drawn randomly. The challenge was search your name, and when you put Gunter into an image search, you got the first 10 that we were using are all this penguin from Adventure Time. So I didn't really have many options, but lucky for me, the random mini robot that I drew did actually sort of have a bird-like face already built in, so we ended up with our robot penguin. So this piece might be right in there with SpongeBob, with the ones that worked out the least in the month. This was a STL from scratch, another from scratch challenge, and essentially what happened was we had the program creates a three-dimensional image that I designed. I have to put it into a different program to fill up that image with solid matter, and that part of it failed somehow. So they essentially tried 3D printing this outer casing of an empty shell that was 0 width, 0 thickness, and it just didn't print it. So this one kind of botched from the beginning, but learned a lot about the 3D printing process, and that challenge was that. Some of the ones for the challenges just were challenging, so they didn't turn out as artistic as some of the others. Next up, along with our search your name challenge for the Patreon side, I decided to put in the MiniMishaps as the search for the 10 images. And the random mini we picked is, I think this is Zod from the Superman movie. And the image that we picked was essentially a jungle scape, a jungle scene. And so he was painted up to have sort of a jungle metallic camouflage. I really, really like how it turned out. I mean, the highlights look intentional. The type of highlights make the cape look like cloth versus the other parts look like metal. And so it all together turned out really, I like the way it turned out. Next up, so this was the kids drawing challenge, and the color scheme for this Ankylosaurian was a Santa drawing that my 4-year-old did. And so I put the colors where he put them on Santa. So we ended up with orange and red and brown and blue in the middle. I really like how the spikes turned out on the back, and actually how his eyes turned out were pretty good as well. So that was a fun challenge, and my 4-year-old absolutely just loves anytime he gets to participate. So next up, we have got a from scratch. We built a Lego mold and mold casted one of my 4-year-old's toys, which is a minion, for that if he ever got lost, then we could mold cast him another one. So we're moving into some of the holiday minis that my family usually celebrates the holidays after the actual holidays, so these ones fell in the January purview. But we've got Mrs. Claus, and these are only in the order that I finished them, so there isn't really a particular order. They were done mostly at the same time. But I did these 3 as a Patreon match to the Santa drawing Ankylosaurus. But these were dollar store minis, and they were basically just red plastic when they started. So, like how the shading turned out, like how the eyes and the fabric turned out. It was nice using red and not having it have to be gore. And I couldn't get the snowman's scarf to land right, but that's okay. So we've got Mrs. Claus, Mr. Claus, and the snowman. Then I've got a piece of terrain that finished around the same time. This is either an alchemist's alcove or a bartender's station. So this one is going to end up in the Glasha's Pub diorama with a bunch of the other stuff. So next up we had our lighting challenge. We did light and sweet. And if you saw the gingerbread man we made, those ended up being sweet. And we've got another sweet one coming up. But for lighting, I expected to do a object source lighting, and I just could not get it to work. So we ended up putting glow-in-the-dark paint on this dark gray black gargoyle. Turned out pretty cool. You can't tell it in the picture, but it's neat to see this thing light up in the dark. We had a couple of pieces from my brother-in-law that he got as holiday gifts that he asked me to paint. This treasure box, and then the fire actually really turned out neat with how the highlighting for the lighter parts on the inside lit up by the fire versus the darker grays on the outside of the rocks. The wood tones with several browns and washes and shading. Now this was a beast at the beginning because whatever reason this kind of plastic didn't take paint, didn't take primer, it wouldn't work with the dyes like we did the one food dye. So it was eventually I got a more industrial primer and that worked after that. But to start this piece off, I don't know if it's some sort of hydrophobic plastic, but it was a doozy to try and get started on that one, even though I absolutely adore how it turned out at the end. Alright, so talking about object source lighting, back with the glowing gargoyle, I did end up doing a object source for the fire pit for the Patreon supporters, and it turned out okay. You can tell that there's fire directly in front of him. You can tell that he's cooler on the back side of the mini versus the front, even though it's kind of cartoonish or the fire is directly almost upon him. I also offered to gift my D&D group, the other players, with painted miniature. So Frybox64 got Tadeo Salazar, who is her character in our virtual adventures on Discord. And so he turned out really good. This was actually an elf that I scraped off the ears and painted over the hair and painted a little headband in, so ended up turning out looking really pretty good. Okay, so we did the light part of the light and sweet, bright and sweet challenge for 2021, and so here's the sweet part. This is a mold cast in blue chocolate of the Aladdin genie. So it's a really tiny little genie. That circle he's sitting on is a Dixie cup, so it's pretty little. Couldn't get the chocolate to get liquid enough to get down into the hands, so his arms only come out to where his cups would be because the air bubbles got stuck there. So I had next one, if I did it again, I would have to cut the mold a little bit, let the air get out of those hand areas. But altogether, not a bad mold cast. Tasty, also. The painting as well as repair of Wrath, the Dragonkin, really was fun to do. It's a Hero Forge miniature, and the player was really excited to see him come together. And yeah, just a fun piece that turned out looking pretty good at the end. Same thing here, another one of the D&D gift paintings was for this Displacer Beast, and they just turned out cool. That whole group of them just looked very ready to use in the adventure. Alright, so this little guy was the first time I ever built a miniature off of a sprue. I got a box of these snake men as a gift over the holidays, and I did 2 of them, this one and the next one. And this one I glued together first, and having no idea that I didn't make a plan on what weapons to pick, if any, for the hands, the direction of the head, and he ended up, now he's a bard because it looks like he's serenading whoever's standing next to him, which would be this guy. So I also didn't realize that I picked the same head. They both got the singing, screaming, yelling, excited, whatever head. Although this one is in the earth tones and is holding the bow and arrow and has the quiver across the back. So, but these, yeah, they turned out well. This one I painted before I assembled it, and the other teal one I assembled first. And I think from now on I'm going to go with the assembling, because painting them you have to be super mindful that you don't paint a spot that you have to glue, otherwise the paint just serves as a divider. Next up, I did I got a photography arm from an anonymous gifter, and so I dropped everything and I skipped the line with this miniature for the video order so that I could show relatively quickly how it works to be seen from above. So now when you're watching me paint, everything you see is from above, and it's thanks to that mystery curious watcher was how they pegged themselves. Then we had our no paintbrush challenge, and so I used this zombie is painted with cotton swab, and I really like that the fingers and the beard and the elbows and the knife, the parts that were sharp, kind of ripped away at the cotton swab and left painted strings of whatever you want them to be. Like, they could be gore or ichor or spider webs or whatever, but added in that extra kind of creepy element to them, which is pretty cool. You don't get all the same details with the brush, obviously, but it was still a lot of fun to do this one. And then for the Patreons, with that no paintbrush, I painted a spray paint can man, just as sort of an ironic. But this one was also fun to paint. The eyes were built in, and just went with sort of a toxic, messy mix of the yellow and goblin green and a little silver and a little white. Next up, we have got, for one of our Made from Scratch series, I did this as the Duolingo mascot. They have a fan art thread, and so I sent this over to their fan art to commemorate. I've completed my Spanish program to the first trophy, so this felt like a good time to do the Duolingo owl in clay. And this is our monthly focus piece for the, basically I spent more time on this miniature than other ones for challenges and things. Got it looking as good as I could. Very happy how it turned out. This is another Hero Forge miniature, and since this picture I have gone around the rim at the bottom with black. So, so Miniac, if you're watching, you can be happy about that. The trident didn't print out, so she ended up with a single trident instead of a double one. It was a trident staff on 2 sides. But I think it looks just as fine with a single. Love the way the shells turned out all around. And I went back in and greened up some of the highlights. And this miniature was a lot of fun to work on. So, and this is the one that if I start trying to build a Age of Sigmar Teach Gunter How to Play army with no Games Workshop models, then she'd be one of the first Seraphon pieces. Alright, this dwarf didn't have a project. He was just fun, and I just had fun painting him. And the wash sat weird on the first round and made it look like he had an eye patch, so then I eye patched him on purpose. I like it so much with the eye patch, and the rest of the wash went really nicely down into the beard and into the armor and stuff, and even created the sort of cartoonish eye effect, and I kept it, and I just really like it, and he just looks like he's ready to march off and swat somebody with that meat tenderizer. I don't think I've ever seen a hammer like that where it's the 9 points of a it looks like it's a kitchen utensil more than a battle one, but this was one of 2 minis that I painted on the side while my 4-year-old was painting his dinosaurs, and he was, as we went, he was picking the colors for them, so you ended up with this nice magical pink and magical blue swords for this guy and green hair, and that was just a lot of fun, and it's just neat to see his creativity come out in the colors that he picked. We had our comic book character challenge, and the random mini I drew was this druid, and boy did he look like Thor before he started, and really extra looked like Thor by the end. Just really happy with how this went out. I polled a couple of folks and asked them before telling them if they could tell who it was, and they all guessed Thor, so that's a success, I think, in my book. This is the other mini that I painted while my 4-year-old was painting his dinosaurs. I don't know why the wash ended up turning him into having sort of like a Hitler mustache, but we'll just try to focus on the orange jumpsuit, I guess. Magic blue sword there. Alright, we did a little tutorial on what happens if you just do highlights and washes and no base coat, and we ended up with this llama and some pretty cool looking fur, and that llama will be used with my character in the D&D campaign. He just procured a llama. And our last mini in the January series before we switch over to the next month here is our Roy G. Biv challenge piece, and this challenge is to put every color of the rainbow. So I gave him sort of a striped Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat coat, as well as a neon pink hat that ended up looking really sweet red instead of the neon pink. Fixed his beard. The beard was a scarf on the wrong part of the neck, and the mouth was in the wrong spot on the face. This was another one from the Dollar Tree, but really had a fun time sort of adjusting the colors and putting everything where it went back to. So that is a month in review for January 2021. Thank you for following along with us, and if you like the video, like and subscribe. There have been 3 October, November, and December 30 minis in 30 days so far. This is the 4th one, and we will see you guys at the end of February for the next one. Thanks, Internet.